Welcome, listeners, to our cinematic storytelling corner. Today, let us open the door once again to step into the vast, magnificent, yet mysterious universe of a television legend that has slumbered for over 2 decades. Farscape. Let's turn back time to the year 1999. It was the turn of the millennium, a time when fear of the Y2K bug loomed, but also when human imagination soared to its highest heights. Amidst that backdrop, Farscape debuted like a supernova, shattering every standard of the sci-fi genre at the time. Not as pristine and polished as Star Trek, nor as politically heavy as Babylon 5. Farscape was a beautifully chaotic mess, insane and full of emotion. The story of astronaut John Crichton, swept by a wormhole into the uncharted territories to live among bizarre alien creatures on the living ship Moya, became the Bible for millions of fans. The show achieved dazzling success through a combination of human acting and the pinnacle of puppetry art from the Jim Henson Company. But ladies and gentlemen behind the silicone masks beneath costumes weighing dozens of kilograms, and after the director yelled, "Cut were flesh and blood, human beings with hearts full of scars." More than 25 years have passed, and time, like a cruel sculptor, has carved indelible marks upon their lives. Some have risen from the ashes, some chose a life of seclusion, and painfully some had to end their journey in tragedy and tears. Today, join me in listening to the echoes of the past to understand and cherish what they sacrificed for their art. Melissa Jaffer as Utu Noranti, Pralatong the poison herbalist and the loneliness of old age. First, let us speak of the woman who brought ancient wisdom to the ship Moya, Melissa Jaffer. Born on December 1st, 1936 in the windswept land of Gladstone, South Australia, Melissa was no blooming flower when she stepped into Farscape. At the age of 63, when many would have chosen to rest, she donned ragged robes and painted on artificial wrinkles, though real ones had already deepened to transform into Utu Noranti. Pralatong Noranti was not an easy character to understand. She was mysterious, a bit mad, always muttering spells and brewing pots of bubbling strange potions. But hidden deep within that eccentricity was the heart of a grandmother, a spiritual mother always worrying for the safety of the Moya crew. On screen, Noranti always had a remedy for every toxin, advice for every trouble, but, ironically, in real life, Melissa Jaffer could not find a cure for the loneliness gnawing at her own soul. Her life is a sad testament to the conflict between the woman of the family and the artist. She once had a marriage lasting more than 2 decades with a talented theater producer. To outsiders, it seemed like a perfect match in the sanctuary of the arts. But behind closed doors were years filled with tears and suppression. Her husband, a man of traditional values, always yearned for Melissa to give up the glamorous stage light to retreat to the rear, to care for the children and keep the home fires burning. But for Melissa, art was not a job, it was breath, it was flesh and blood. She could not live without the stage. The struggle between the desire to perform and the duty of a wife created irreparable cracks. Finally, in the early 1980s, they reached a breaking point. The divorce happened, leaving Melissa with a deep wound in her heart. She once bitterly admitted in a moment of vulnerability, "I felt like I lost part of my soul." The freedom I gained was bought at too high a price. With no children and no family by her side, Melissa's years following that were a sequence of days submerged in frightening silence. When the stage lights went out, she returned to an empty house facing 4 cold walls. After the success of Farscape, tragedy continued to strike in the form of illness. Old age hit like a storm. Sudden heart attacks caused her to collapse multiple times in her own home. Chronic arthritis tormented her hands and legs, making every step and every gesture an extraordinary effort. Chronic insomnia turned long nights into torture. Her failing health forced her to turn down many major roles, opportunities she had craved her whole life, yet the fire of her profession never died. In 2015, audiences saw her appear impressively as the seed keeper in the blockbuster Mad Max Fury Road. Though only a supporting role, her resilient gaze still sent shivers down viewers' spines. Currently, Melissa Jaffer has turned 89. She still lives in Australia in a world of her own. Occasionally, she still tries to step onto small local stages, not for fame or money, but as a spiritual medicine, a way to feel she is still alive, still useful. An estimated net worth of $800,000 US. Dollars may provide a materially sufficient life, but it can never fill the void of solitude and the sorrow of the human condition in her twilight years. Jonathan Hardy as Dominar, Rigel the 16th, the king without a throne and a smile hiding tears. If Noranti was wisdom, then Dominar Rigel the 16th was the embodiment of greed, selfishness, yet incredible lovability. And the man who breathed soul into that tiny puppet was Jonathan Hardy. Born on October 20th, 1940 in New Zealand, Jonathan came to Farscape at the age of 59. He did not appear directly on screen, but his voice was the magic that turned a rubber puppet into one of the most vivid characters. Rigel, the deposed ruler of the Hynerian Empire, was pompous, always demanding, yet possessed unexpected moments of bravery. Jonathan's high-pitched, arrogant voice mixed with wry humor became an irreplaceable trademark. He made the audience want to punch this tiny king, yet simultaneously want to hug him. But ladies and gentlemen, behind the laughter Jonathan brought to the audience was a life full of silent tragedies. His marriage of over 40 years to an Australian set designer seemed like a fairy tale in the art world. They came together for the love of beauty, but it was their careers that became the blade severing their emotional bond. Long tours across England and Australia turned them into familiar. Strangers' rushed phone calls and sparse letters could not bridge the gap of geography and time. Their home gradually became a residence of silence and sadness. True tragedy struck it in the 90s, the darkest period of Jonathan's life. The son he loved with all his heart fell into the path of addiction. No pain is greater than that of a father helplessly watching his child slide into the abyss. The torment and anxiety pushed Jonathan into the deep pit of depression. He had to use Rigel's laughter on set to mask the crying in his heart. The pressure from a broken family and stressful work eroded his health ruthlessly. He underwent successive dangerous heart surgeries and fought a persistent battle with cancer for many years. There is a painful parallel between the role and the life. Rigel on screen was always seeking to reclaim his lost throne, while Jonathan in real life was forever searching for peace for his family, something he had lost long ago. Despite the pain in both body and spirit, Jonathan never gave up. He continued to work, continued to dedicate himself until his final days. He had planned a grand return to the stage for another role of a lifetime. However, fate did not grant him that chance. That tumultuous journey came to an abrupt and painful halt on July 30th, 2012. Jonathan Hardy took his final breath in Hilltop, New South Wales, at the age of 71. The cause of death was a severe infection complication following leg surgery, an ending too sudden and heartbreaking. He departed leaving a net worth of $15 million, largely from the role of Rigel and the screenplay for the classic film, Breaker Morant. But the greatest legacy he left was not money, but immortal laughter and a lesson on the resilience of an artist who performed comedy right atop the tragedy of his own life. Kent McCord as Jack Crichton, the aging father, and the gaze across the universe. Amidst the chaotic and danger-filled universe of Farscape, the character Jack Crichton appeared as a steady anchor, a symbol of earth and home. And the man who portrayed this role, Kent McCord, carried within him that same incredible calmness. Born on September 26, 1942 in Los Angeles, the cradle of world cinema, Kent McCord had been a television star since the 60s and 70s with the series Adam 12. When joining Farscape at age 57, he played John Crichton's father. Although his screen time was not extensive, every time he appeared, whether in memory or hallucination, he brought a strange sense of safety and warmth. His steady gaze, warm, deep voice, and unconditional love were the driving forces for John Crichton to find his way home. In real life, Kent McCord was also a tower of strength protecting his family from the storms of Hollywood. His marriage to Cynthia Lee Doty is a rare miracle. It has lasted more than 63 years, in a place where marriages are often counted in months. Their bond is extraordinary. However, a miracle does not mean the path was strewn with roses. When the aura of Adam 12 faded in the 70s, Kent faced the harsh reality of making ends. Meet financial pressure to raise 3 children in the heart of expensive Los Angeles weighed heavily on his shoulders. The stifling atmosphere of fame, temptations, and media scrutiny pushed their marriage to the brink of divorce many times. There were times when arguments replaced words of love, and tears fell more often than smiles. But through perseverance, loyalty, and the responsibility of a man, Kent overcame it all with his wife. They chose to grow old together rather than letting go in the middle of the storm. The calmness of Jack Crichton on screen seemed to seep into Kent's personality, helping him face the greatest health crisis of his life. In 2005, the heart of that great father began to tire. He suffered from severe heart disease and had to undergo major coronary artery bypass surgery. Since then, he has lived with medication and periodic medical checkups. Declining health forced him to say goodbye to the stage lights after more than half a century of tireless dedication. Today, at the age of 83, Kent McCord is enjoying peaceful days in California. He has stepped back from the noise of showbiz, choosing a simple life with his faithful wife and descendants. Occasionally, he still appears at Farscape fan events where he is welcomed as a hero, with a net worth of about $13 million. He has a comfortable old age. His eyes still hold that gentle and steady look, the gaze of a man who has been through enough ups and downs to understand that ultimate happiness is not fame, but having a home to return to. Virginia Hay, as Pau Zoto Jean Beauty, exchanged for blood. If one must choose the most heartbreaking story of sacrifice for art among the Farscape cast, it is undoubtedly the story of Virginia Hay. Born on June 19, 1952 in Sydney, Virginia, possessed a sharp beauty, having been a model and muse for many fashion magazines. At age 47, she took on the role of Pau Zoto Jean, a blue-skinned Delvian priestess, an evolved plant-based being with infinite wisdom and compassion. Jean was the healing soul of the ship Moya, the one willing to sacrifice herself to protect her crewmates. But ironically, to become the healer on film, Virginia had to destroy her own health with her own hands. To transform into Jean every day, Virginia had to sit for hours while makeup artists covered her body in a thick layer of blue paint, along with prosthetics to shape her ears and head. The horror was that this paint and adhesive contained extremely toxic chemicals. For 3 long years, her skin was sealed shut, and her kidneys had to work overtime to filter toxins seeping into her blood. She frequently suffered nosebleeds and fainted from exhaustion on set. Doctors warned her, if you continue, you will die. That is the reason the character Jean had to sacrifice herself. In the film, a tragic death that took the tears of millions of viewers, but few knew it was the actress's escape from the Grim Reaper. She was forced to shave her head, shave off her eyebrows and eyelashes for years to serve the role, losing her feminine appearance weighed heavily on the psychology of a former model like her, pushing her into self-consciousness and depression. Behind that aura and extraordinary beauty was a private life full of suffering. Virginia married at 21, but the marriage lasted only 6 months. Her husband could not stand his wife's fame, and they separated bitterly. Since then, she avoided marriage like a bird afraid of a bent branch. Although she went through tumultuous romances with famous rock stars like Michael Hutchence or John Taylor, they all ended in loneliness. The more famous she became, the more isolated Virginia felt in the stream of life. But the biggest, most brutal shock came in 2022. Virginia was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The vicious disease attacked her lymphatic system and bones, the accumulated consequence of years of weakened health due to chemicals and stress. She had to undergo devastating chemotherapy, stem cell transplants, and full-body radiation. The physical pain was indescribable. Currently, at age 73, Virginia Hay lives alone in London. The image of the majestic goddess Jeanne is now an elderly woman who must move with crutches or a wheelchair. But Jeanne's spirit still lives within her. Virginia has not surrendered to fate. She resiliently makes handmade candles and perfumes to sell online as a way to keep a connection with the outside world. Although expensive medical costs have eroded most of her assets, now remaining at about $1 million, her will to live still burns brightly. Virginia Hay is the most vivid proof of the price of art and also a symbol of resilience that does not bow to adversity. Lani Tupu as pilot and Captain BLR Crace. Two sides of a lonely coin. Lani Tupu is a special case and a rare talent of Farscape. Born on November 4, 1955 in New Zealand, he took on two important roles, simultaneously voicing Pilot, the multi-armed creature fused to the ship, and playing Captain BLR Crace, the initially hate-filled villain. At 44, Lani brilliantly portrayed two opposing extremes. Pilot was gentle patient, the heart of the ship. Moya Crace was ruthless, aggressive, blinded by hatred. But both of these characters reflected Lani's true self. Strong and decisive on the outside, but deep inside lay loneliness and hurt. Lani's private life contained many sad notes. His 30-year marriage to an Australian film producer collapsed under the pressure of changing living environments. Migrating from New Zealand to Australia in the 80s was a big gamble full of risks. A struggling career culture shock and financial difficulties eroded the marital bond. Disagreements about the future grew larger, turning their home into a cold battlefield. The climax of the family tragedy was in 2011, when their only son got caught in the vortex of drugs. The family completely fell apart. Lani collapsed. He withdrew, living a secluded life, avoiding the stage lights and media scrutiny. Not only suffering mental pain, Lani also had to endure physical torture. He suffered from severe rheumatoid arthritis. During the filming of Farscape, the tight, heavy leather costume of Craze and the complex movements when voicing Pilot made his condition worse. There were days when he had to stop filming because the pain was so intense he couldn't move, requiring high doses of painkillers to continue working. Currently, Lani Tupu has turned 70. He lives a quiet life in Sydney, Australia. Illness has limited his mobility, but it cannot extinguish his love for art. He mainly works as a stage director and acting coach for the younger generation, passing the torch to those who follow, although his assets are not vast, about $900,000, and his health is declining. He still diligently writes scripts and dedicates himself to the theater whenever possible. Lani Tupu is like the character Pilot, though, bound by a painful body. His soul always looks toward the stars. Ben Browder as John Crichton, the lost hero, finding his way home. The soul, the heart and the beat of Farscape was none other than Ben Browder. Born on December 11, 1962 in Memphis, Tennessee, Ben played John Crichton, the Earth astronaut lost in the universe at age 37. Throughout 88 episodes, Crichton was the center of all emotions. From a rational scientist, he gradually became manic wild, but also full of humanity when facing dangers in space. Ben played this role with all his passion, intellect, and loneliness reflected from his own real life. The dazzling success of Farscape came with a very high price for Ben's personal life. He married actress Francesca Buller, a former classmate at drama school in London. When the show began filming, his entire family had to move from the U.S. to Australia. Uprooting from a familiar environment, separated from relatives and friends, created an invisible pressure. A grueling, stressful filming schedule, often lasting 14-16 hours a day, combined with the fact that Francesca only played small guest roles in the show while her husband was the brightest star, created distances in the marriage. In 2000, their marriage stood on the brink of collapse. Arguments, exhaustion, and intense homesickness almost caused them to sign divorce papers, but for the sake of their two young children, and believing that love could overcome distance, they chose to heal, overcoming the stormiest period together. However, the challenges did not stop there. When Farscape was abruptly canceled in 2002, Ben fell into a state of shock and emptiness. He felt betrayed after so much dedicated effort. This shock led to a severe nervous breakdown. Although he was later invited to star in the hit series Stargate SG-1. The pressure of shouldering a major franchise continued to weigh on him. Depression and insomnia haunted him for many years, forcing him to take a long break from acting to find balance and heal his soul. Today, Ben Browder is 63 years old, living a peaceful life in California with Francesca and their 2 children. He has found his way home. He chose to slow down, no longer chasing fame at all costs. He focuses on writing scripts, directing independent films, and occasionally appearing at Comic-Con events to pay tribute to fans. With a net worth of $3 million, Ben has attained the peace that the character Crichton yearned to find throughout his journey. Wayne Pygram as Scorpius, the villain with a saint's heart. If one must name one of the most impressive villains in 2000s television history, Scorpius cannot be omitted. And the man who created this villain was Wayne Pygram, born on October 13, 1959 in Cootamundra, Australia. With an icy face, a piercing gaze, and a tight leather suit with a cooling apparatus attached to his head, Wayne turned Scorpius into John Crichton's nightmare. He was intelligent, ruthless, half Scaran, half Sebastian, always one step ahead of his opponent. But ladies and gentlemen, behind the mask of the universe's vilest villain was a life full of sacrifice and patience of a great father. Wayne married Leanne in 1985, and their marriage has lasted nearly 40 years. Their biggest challenge was not showbiz, but their son, who suffered from autism. While on set, Wayne had to transform into a cunning manipulator, but when he returned home, he was the gentlest father in the world. He and his wife took turns staying up all night to care for their child, dealing with the child's crises. The pressure of developing a top-tier career while caring for a special needs child often left them exhausted and isolated from the surrounding world. Love and responsibility kept his feet on the ground in a painful conflict between art and family. Furthermore, the role of Scorpius left him with severe physical sequelae. The tight, heavy leather costume, along with sitting for makeup for 4 hours every day, caused him chronic herniated discs. Intense back pain has become his reluctant companion for the past 2 decades. He was forced to use painkillers to continue acting, and eventually had to give up action roles that required physical strength. Currently, Wayne Pygram is 66 years old, living quietly in Sydney. He has stepped back to become a drum teacher at the Riverina Conservatorium of Music. He finds joy in music, occasionally participating in voice acting for games. A modest net worth of about $800,000 does not speak to the full value of the man. Wayne Pygram is proof that sometimes the person playing the most evil role on film is the one with the saintliest heart in real life. Anthony Simcoe as Ka Dargo, the fallen giant and the resurrection. Anthony Simcoe, born on May 30th, 1969 in Sydney, possessed the ideal physique to play the Luxon warrior Kadargo, nearly 2 meters tall, rippling muscles, and a deep, powerful voice. Dargo was one of the most beloved characters for his loyalty, bravery, and the kind heart hidden behind a fierce appearance. But contrary to Dargo's steadfastness on film, Anthony in real life struggled in a battle with his own ego. In 2005, he married actress Roxanne McDonald and had 2 children. It seemed happiness smiled upon the giant, but the pressure of work and the temptation of fame pushed him onto the path of alcoholism. Endless drunken nights and uncontrolled actions gradually stole his family's trust. Alcohol turned him into a different person, volatile and irresponsible. The inevitable consequence came in 2012 when his wife filed for divorce. The court, considering his addiction and unstable mental state, temporarily stripped Anthony of custody. That was a fatal blow to a father's self-esteem, losing his family, losing his children. Anthony fell into a severe mental crisis. He suffered from a nervous breakdown and deep depression. He withdrew completely from public life, disappearing from the screen to enter rehab centers, beginning the toughest battle of his life, defeating the demon of alcohol. Throughout the treatment, depression forced him to pause all artistic activities. He had to learn to face his mistakes, learn to forgive himself in order to stand up. In 2025, at the age of 56, Anthony Simcoe is living a new life in Sydney. He has regained his balance. He occasionally appears in police TV dramas or independent film projects. He spends most of his time with his two children. He worked hard to regain visitation rights, teaching acting and playing music with the band Signal Room, the group he co-founded during the Farscape era, with assets of about $1 million. He chooses a life away from noisy parties. Anthony's story is a moving lesson about falling and the effort to redeem oneself. Claudia Black as Aaron's son, the warrior woman and the inner war. Accompanying Crichton was Aaron's son, played by Claudia Black, born on October 11, 1972 in Sydney. Claudia created a feminist monument in the sci-fi genre at age 27. She transformed into a cold, iron-disciplined peacekeeper soldier who gradually learned to love and soften through each episode. As strong as Aaron's son was on screen, Claudia Black in real life suffered just as much trauma. Behind that brilliant success was a marriage drowning in crisis. Claudia married Jamie Thurkettle in 2004 and had two cute sons, Odin and Vigo. However, the price of an international career was constant flights between Australia, the US, and the UK. Geographic separation, conflicting work schedules, and deep disagreements on parenting gradually killed their love. In 2013, they officially divorced. This breakup was a heavy psychological shock for Claudia. For months, she fell into depression and chronic insomnia. She felt helpless, lonely, and once thought she would never be able to love or be loved again. After the divorce, she was diagnosed with chronic anxiety disorder. Panic attacks would strike suddenly, causing rapid heartbeat, shortness of breath, and trembling limbs. There were times she had to ask to stop recording while working on major game projects like Dragon Age or Mass Effect because she couldn't control her emotions. But in those darkest moments, voice acting became her lifebelt. In the secluded recording booth, needing no makeup, not having to face blinding lights, Claudia found her inner strength again. Her powerful and emotional voice helped her rebuild her career, becoming a queen in the world of gaming and animation. Currently, Claudia Black is 53 years old, living in Los Angeles. She continues to dedicate her voice to major projects like Uncharted or Gears of War. She has found peace with her two sons and her work teaching emotional acting techniques. A net worth of $12 million is a worthy reward for the tireless efforts of the mother Aaron's son in real life, a woman who went through brokenness to heal herself and shine in her own way. David Franklin as Captain Miklo Braca, the last survivor. Finally, we come to David Franklin, who played Captain Miklo Braca, the loyal and sometimes treacherous subordinate of Scorpius, born on March 7, 1962 in Melbourne. David successfully portrayed a character full of ambition but always living. In fear, a man always teetering on the boundary between loyalty and betrayal to survive. With subtle acting, David turned Braca into the last survivor in the chaotic world of power struggles. But behind the scenes, David was wrestling with a silent family crisis. In 2005, after 15 years together, his marriage fell apart. The root cause was the years spent constantly away from home pursuing his acting career. The end of this relationship was not announced loudly, but it left him with a lingering loneliness. He threw himself into work to escape the mental pain, and to make matters worse, David suffered from chronic asthma since childhood. The enclosed filming environment, artificial smoke, and thick makeup of Farscape made his condition worse. Sudden attacks of breathlessness caused him to be rushed to the emergency room. Multiple times illness soon showed him the limits of his body, forcing him to make a painful decision to quit professional acting. In 2025, at the age of 63, David Franklin has completely changed direction. He is now a professor of film studies at the University of Sydney. He is finishing his debut film as a director, a work exploring loneliness in the modern world. A net worth of about $700,000 from his years on Farscape and Xena Warrior Princess is enough for him to live a simple intellectual life.